Hello everybody, this is the second lesson on news translation. In today's lesson we'll talk about news translation characteristics. In general, the main and general characteristics of news translation is to be accurate in your writing, to be precise, to be timely and updated, and that you need to have well-rounded knowledge of everything. You need to know something about everything. And you need to have interesting content that reflects your own beliefs, your own political viewpoints. But as I said in the first class, you need to be objective in your writing. The language you use must be objective language. So let's talk first about the choice of words or diction. 句子用字. The words you choose should be short and simple. Always go for short words. So you use about, say about instead of approximately, say ban instead of prohibit, say bar instead of prevent, and so on. Number two, the abbreviations. Always use abbreviations. You say UNESCO instead of United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. You don't mention this the UNESCO in its full name. You say memo instead of memorandum, and so on. You say quake instead of earthquake, flu instead of influenza, and you also use contracted form like intel instead of international. All this in order to save space on the page. You also use synecdoche. You use the part in order to indicate the whole. So you say the White House, referring to the American government. You say Beijing, referring to the Chinese government. You say Pentagon, referring to the National Defense Department of the USA. You say Downing Street number 10, referring to the British government. So you use the part to refer to the whole, and vice versa. You always use specific and short and vivid words, like hurry instead of writing walk hurriedly, an issue instead of controversial issue, and balloon meaning swell out like a balloon. You use just one word but use it as a verb. So swell out like a balloon, like the country's population could balloon from 20 million today to 83 million in 2025. You also use new and trendy words, and of course what is new today will be old tomorrow, and what was new yesterday is old today. So for example, back in the 60s, words like moonwalk, moonfall, moonrock, moonscape, moonship, and all of that, all these words were new words back in the 1960s, but they are old now. So always try to come up with new words and trendy words. Take for example this line. It's written by an Iranian politician. We are struggling against autocracy for democracy by means of xerocracy. Xerocracy here he's making up this word. It's coming from Xerox. So what he means is that by photocopying their documents and writings about democracy and spreading this, distributing these pamphlets to people. So use always new and trendy words. You can also use loan words, words taken and borrowed from foreign language, like the sine qua non of. It's taken from Latin. It means "Picideis," it means must, and so on. But of course you have to use these foreign words in the right context. Also you can use sometimes, even though it's not really recommended to use any slang in your news coverage, but sometimes slang used and colloquial language used in the headline when there is something really big that you need, devastating for example, and you need to get the attention of your audience. Like look at this New York Post headline, and the main headline on the front page: what the heck are you up to, Mr. President? Also you can use jargon again in the right context. About this, the sentence structure. Always use simple and clear. Always use simple and clear. Always use the simple form, that the subject, the verb, and the object. 注意动词和宾语. And you use always short sentences. The sentence should be in English around 16 to 18 words. Try not to use more than 20 words per sentence, even though sometimes when it's used in the lead, the first paragraph of the news, sometimes it goes much longer than that, because the lead should come in one sentence. As I said, use the normal word order, subject, verb, and object. The structure of the news reports starts with the headline. Sometimes there is sub-headlines, but this is not necessarily, it's just optional. Then the lead. The lead should be only one paragraph, one sentence in English. In Chinese it can come in 2 sentences. Then the body of the report, and there is a conclusion, but again this is optional, and later on we'll talk about each of these parts. Let's talk a little bit about all of these news reporting elements. The headline has to be eye-catching, expressing the content, and use as few words as possible in the headline. Don't try to use write a long headline unless it's an inside story, but the front page has to be a short headline, just a few words, as few as possible. In the lead you need to have your 5 W's. Your 5 W's: who, in this priority, who, what, when and where, and why. So who, what, where, when, and why. In the body of the report, you also can give more information as to how. Add to these 5 W's, how. This in the news report, that you only stick to facts, use objective language, and you can give more information about the subject you are writing about. Story background. Then in the conclusion you can have a concluding line. This is optional, but it has to be, if you write a conclusion line, it has to be inspiring and echoing afterwards. You need to have this powerful line to end your report with, and you can end that paragraph, that conclusion, with expressions like in conclusion, therefore, as expressed, overall, as a result, thus, finally, lastly, for this reason, in general, and so on. The format and the structure of the news report, the first is called reverse pyramid or inverted pyramid, and that means you start with the most important facts, the 5 W's we just mentioned: who, what, where, when, and why, and then in the body you start to talk about more details, but you start with the most important facts. You always bear in mind that your audience, they don't have time to read the whole report, so the headline should tell about the content. The sub-headlines also should tell more about the content, and the leads should give us enough, the most important information, that if we don't go on reading beyond the lead, at least we should have gotten the whole picture. The second format is called the pyramid. The pyramid format, that's the chronologically structured report, that you write it like you're writing a story. Okay, so you start from or with the least important fact, then down to more important, and until you end with the most important fact. But the most commonly used pattern and format is the reverse pyramid format. Then the third format is called suspense. That's a mix of both inverted pyramid format and the pyramid format. Try in your headline and lead not to use the same words. For example, if a headline says NATO hunt Kosovo gunmen, for example, then the lead should go: NATO peacekeepers are searching for, not hunt, not hunting, not hunting for, searching for. So try to use different vocabulary in the lead, different from what you used in the headline. The last thing I would say is about the news translation difficulties, some difficulties. Always, of course there are several things to say, but I will just mention one thing today, and that's when you translate certain words, you need always to avoid these politically incorrect words. Politically incorrect. For example, this 中国大陆 in Chinese, how would you translate it into English? Is it Chinese mainland, or the mainland of China, or mainland China? Actually, you need first to see who your audience is. Is your audience in China or somewhere else? Because in China, then you have to translate it as mainland China. Because Chinese mainland and the mainland of China, it may imply that there are two Chinas, and that may offend the people in China. So if your audience is Chinese people in China, then you need to say mainland China. For example, another one, 改革开放. 改革开放, at the beginning it was translated as transform or change. Then after that it was translated as open door. Then nowadays it's translated as reform. But this open door, always try to avoid this sensitivity, because open door may remind Chinese people of the open door policy imposed on China in the late 19th century by the West. There are always new expressions and words you come across to translate, especially in politics, like for example, Sanjiang. How would you translate Sanjiang? Emphasize the need to study, to have political awareness, and to be honest and upright. It's very long. It's very long, even though in Chinese it's only 2 words. So you can shorten it to say just emphasize 3 things: study, politics, and integrity. You come across all these new expressions in news translation, and you always have to struggle finding the best translation. Like 三个代表, this is new expression coined by Jiang Zemin, the former Chinese president, but the official and formal translation of it now is the 3 represents. Or Parong Pacher, 8 honors and 8 shames, or 8 do's and 8 don'ts. You need to find the most suitable translation for new expressions. Another expression, 外向型经济. 外向型经济. It means, at the beginning it was translated as export-oriented economy, then outward-looking economy. Nowadays it's translated as global market economy. The final expression, and we end our class here, 全面建设小康社会. To build a well-off society in an all-round way. That was translated. This is how it was translated at the beginning. That was the translation. Later on it was translated as to build a moderately prosperous society in all aspects. With this we end our second lesson. I hope you found it useful, and see you in lesson 3.
فكر في واجبك كما تفكر في حقك، واعمل طلبا للإتقان لا طلبا للشهرة والجزاء، ولا تنتظر من الناس أكثر مما يحق للناس أن ينتظروه منك.